Hilton Head Town Manager Steve Riley joins us. A couple of things I always remember about May, Steve. Hurricane season starts, though we really don't go crazy about it until later in the summer. And May is also budget season, complicated this year a little bit by the coronavirus. You take your budget to town council this week. Anything different in it?
Well, we've cut some out of CIP right to start, but what we're proposing to council, because of the unusual circumstances, because there's so much that's unknown, and because of the difficulties in conducting meetings virtually, we are, last year for the first time ever, we did a 2-year budget. We're asking council just to go ahead and adopt the budget for year 2 that we presented them last year, again with some CIP already cut.
CIP?
Capital Improvements Program, construction projects. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Speaking in that good lingo, I love it.
Yeah.
Where has the hit been taken on your budget so far toward the end of this budget year because of the coronavirus?
Well, I think the first thing to say is we had, our budget year starts July 1. We had 9 very, very good months. Revenues in almost every category ahead of projections, and expenditures all below projections. So we were doing really well up until the end of March.
Okay.
Property taxes pretty much had already come in, so that's a given. Business license is based on last year's numbers, and even though we gave an extension till late June, many of the merchants went ahead and paid up anyway. It's really in the and we don't get much in terms of state sales taxes, but we do have the local accommodations taxes and the local hospitality taxes. Those are where we're expecting the biggest hit, but those are generally paid by most merchants quarterly, and so we know we're going to take a hit. We just don't quite know what it's going to be, and we've postponed the payment on some of those things, and so that's where we're kind of in this. We know we're going to get hit. We just don't quite know how bad. Our best projections are we're going to finish this year $1.5 million in the red, and we've got some reserves that can handle that. And then as I said, we've started to slow down some construction projects, but there's a balance there. Where do you want to, like Shelter Cove road improvements? You know, the fact that we were out there, traffic was down, we were able to do it at night. We're now done, and we're done faster and cheaper than it would have been otherwise. You got to find that balance of where do you keep some things going and where do you hold back. More than half my budget is public safety, so there's limits there to what I would want to do. You know, travel and discretionary expenditures and things we'd like to have but aren't absolutely critical to the day-to-day operation, all those things are being slowed down and postponed, and we'll see in the fall kind of time frame how this summer went, and that's going to give us a strong indication of where the rest of our revenues are going to come.
Sure, and what will happen next year, and how the budget will have to change and will be allowed to change.
Exactly.
Also something that boy, it generally tends to put me on snooze real quick. Community Development Block Grant money, federal money that comes to the town, usually to do specific kind of things. There's some good news there, huh?
There's some great news there. Normally, no more than about 10% of the funds, and we get about $200,000 plus or minus each year. It's based on a federal allocation formula that I couldn't begin to explain to you. But roughly $200,000 a year. Generally, no more than 10% of it can go towards programs. Stuff provided like by not-for-profits to benefit low and moderate income, and all this money must benefit low and moderate income residents of Hilton Head Island. This year, because of coronavirus, the feds have done 2 things. They've allowed us to take 100% of this year's money and provide it to not-for-profits that are providing services to low and moderate incomes. And through the CARES Act, they've given us a supplemental allocation, all of which must go towards not-for-profits that provide those services. So
how big a pot's that going to be?
We're talking roughly about $350,000.
Great.
And it requires us to change our 5-year plan, and we're doing that and taking that to council this week. And it also, because we frankly don't know as much as we would like to know about what services are providing, what duplication there might be in applications, we are contracting with, or we're proposing to council that we contract with the Community Foundation of Lowcountry. It would be a separate fund because this money must be spent only on Hilton Head Island, but they would do the reviews, they would do the allocations, and they'd then be able to check against other applications that they have for their other funds. And so,
Okay. Yeah,
avoid
so the
duplication.
right hand and left hand actually working together.
Absolutely.
What a process. That's good stuff. It has certainly been an interesting ride this spring. Are things starting to level out town-wise? We're pretty much back to now. We're just kind of taking what the governor gives back and rolling with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
The governor has reopened now. He started with the outdoor dining restaurants. He's now reopening indoor dining at 50% capacity. But all these are guidelines.
Right.
All these are recommendations. Sheriff is still out there enforcing where people are getting unruly the 3-person limit. But if people are well behaved, we're not wading in just because there's 3, or he's not wading in just because there's 3 people. It's a balancing act. Beaches, people
I was
have
going to
been.
say, beach population been okay?
Beach has been okay. It's funny because when you stand out there, you look down the beach and it looks pretty crowded. We have that first weekend ran drone footage up and down the beach several different times a day over the 3 days of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When you're up in the air, you can tell that people actually they're grouping and providing a good bit of distance between themselves, and mostly those groupings are small, but there are a few that are larger, and why that is, a large family or people who just don't care, don't really know, but if they weren't unruly, the sheriff's really not trying to do anything about that.
Okay. I want to ask you one last question. You look at the numbers every day, probably, from DHEC. I certainly do. And it's almost scary how good the numbers have been for Hilton Head Island the last couple of 3 weeks. Are we doing that well, do you think?
I think folks who tell you that there's not enough testing to really know are probably the people that I'd probably most depend on, and that's where I think we all as individuals need to be careful.
Bingo.
Government's not going to solve this for you. They're not going to save you from yourself or from others. You got to take action.
Put your mask back on in public, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Steve, thanks so much. We appreciate the time. Hilton Head Town Manager Steve Riley. Back with more of the Hilton Head News in just a moment.